out your advent calendars, because today I'm bringing you the only winter countdown that truly matters. The Ben's Watch Club Best Affordable Watches of the Year ranking list. Yeah, I got hands-on with over 200 watches across my 2 channels in 2025, and today I'll be sharing with you the very best options I tried over the last 12 months. 20 watches of all shapes, sizes, and styles that you'll be writing to Santa for as soon as you've seen them. And while I did try some more expensive watches this year, as the title suggests, I'll be sticking to the lower cost sub £500 or sub $600 offerings, because my idea of affordable doesn't involve remortgaging your house. You'll find all of these watches linked in the video description if you do want to check them out for yourself. And while I bought most of these with my own money, some were provided by brands or retailers at my request for previous videos, the details of which are also down below. I'll begin with some honorable mentions that almost made the list. Citizen's new Ciosa 37mm offered the same sporty package in a more compact form factor, but was hampered by an underwhelming selection of launch colors and a very hazy sapphire crystal. San Martin's Year of the Snake limited edition suffered from similar legibility issues, but offered up a phenomenal 3-dimensional spiral dial with a shine akin to a super rare holographic trading card. Casio tried to recapture the success of 2024's EFB chronograph in the form of the EFB 109D, and while it was decent, it just wasn't quite as handsome as its forebearer. Their MTP 1302PE, on the other hand, was better than its predecessors, with a stunning reverse waffle effect dial and upgraded applied markers. It could easily have made this list, but sadly the chrome-plated case was also carried over from the previous versions, at a price where stainless steel really is the new norm. The Ascent GMT was another fantastically built watch from Erebus, though I personally prefer the sleekness and punchier dials of the standard Ascent. Mercur's Seizen 24-hour field watch was an interesting militaristic choice that only narrowly missed out, as was Certina's underrated DSX GMT, an attractive Swiss-made quartz option with angular features, subdued coloring, and a 2-in-1 compass bezel. If this were a top 21 list, the Certina would have made it. But it's not, and so we move into the top 20. At 20, the Timex Deepwater Reef 200. In a nutshell, the Deepwater Reef is a medium-sized quartz dive watch that ticks all of the main boxes. It's got a nicely finished steel case, with this particular variant boasting a PVD coating, a 120-click bezel with 0 backplay, a screw-down crown with a ton of grip, 200 meters of water resistance, and a scratch-resistant sapphire crystal with a passable level of clarity. Unlike many previous Timex divers, this one also has excellent low-light performance, thanks to the big stacks of lume that make up the hour markers, as well as a good stock band that will also make you think twice about the more expensive bracelet models. Stylistically, you get some of that retro skin diver shaping with the squared off lugs, as well as an Omega-like wave-adorned dial that still looks good up close. With a 41.5mm bezel and 40mm case, it also accommodates a wider variety of wrist sizes than the likes of the Casio Duro. And in essence, that sums up what you get here. A Casio Duro rival that's more expensive, but is better in just about every way. Like how Anson belts are better than standard belts in just about every way too. Yet many of you are still wearing traditional hold belts. You know, the belts that always seem to get raggy around the holes? Well, my sponsor Anson has changed belts forever with an innovative micro-adjustable track system that eliminates the need for holes entirely. No more peeling leather or being stuck between widely spaced holes. Anson is a US-based family-owned company that's been around since 2009, and their belts feature a rear-mounted track that lets you adjust in precise quarter-inch increments, so you always get the perfect fit no matter your waist size. Thanks to the secret ratchet system hidden within the interchangeable buckles, you can even adjust the fit on the fly, whether you're sitting, standing, or on the move with the simple push of a lever. Anson's belts also stay pristine for far longer, because their mechanism never contacts the leather itself, only the rear-mounted track, so the front surface remains totally clear. I've been wearing Anson belts since I had a full head of hair, as you can see, and I've never had to replace a single one. That's doubly so given you can switch the buckles around so they always stay in touch with your attire. They're so good, I've not worn hold belts since. And once you've tried one, I know you won't either. And because Anson Belt and Buckle is sponsoring this video, when you click the link in the description or scan this QR code to build a box set, you'll get 2 bonus pieces, a buckle and a strap, completely free. That's 3 buckles and 3 straps, which can make 9 unique belt combinations all in one box. So click the link, build your box set, and upgrade your belt game today. At 19, the RZE Urbanist. The Urbanist is a £250 or $300 field watch like few others. While it retains some elements from the more traditional field watches, such as fairly standard marker array and a classic classically compact size, the rest is radically more modern. The Urbanist has some obvious street-style influences, with a graffiti-like selection of bright dial colours and the contrasting matte case and strap hardware serving as the canvas. This isn't all for show though. No, this watch is actually very capable from a material perspective. The case is actually made of titanium, with their in-house ultra-hex coating on the surface. The same coating that comprehensively outperformed virtually every other case material in my big watch case scratch test, including other hardness coatings like Citizen's famous Super Titanium. They also make a version of this with a Cerakote case, but I haven't tried that one to date. This practicality extends to the movement and crystal too. The Urbanist is using a Miyota solar movement, so battery changes will be few and far between, if ever. Atop is also a sapphire crystal with an inner side anti-reflective coating that also gives you good clarity, and as you might have guessed from the screw back, you get a solid 1080M water resistance here, so you can dunk it if you need to. The black crown is more limiting than I'd like, but it's still a comfortable, fashion-forward field watch, a combination that's surprisingly difficult to find. For a more run-of-the-mill choice, a quick mention goes to the Thorn SHY043 and Addiesdive AD2076. Two near-identical A17 style field watches that almost made the list themselves for offering great construction and surprising detailing for super low prices. At 18, the Casio EFR S108DE. It seems that every year there's a new version of this fan-favorite sports watch making its way onto this list. This time is the new DE variant, which sports an even more elaborate textured surface, leading to the white dial version accruing the nickname Casio Snowflake for obvious reasons. I personally prefer the green version, but both are pretty impressive on a macro level, with a crusty, almost planetary vibe that matched well with the angular, futuristic case shape. Indeed, you still get the same well-finished, wafer-thin 39mm case, which is a huge reason this watch is so popular, paired with a good water resistance and a sapphire crystal to boot. Overall, this one is still a great all-rounder. In future, I'd love to see Casio experiment with the handset a little more, but otherwise it's a sweet addition to this fabulous line of watches. At 17, the Timex MK1 Mechanical. In 2025, Timex revamped its aging MK1 lineup with a string of new models, the flagships of which were the 40mm MK1 Automatic and the 36mm MK1 Mechanical. At launch, the Automatic stole the headlines, but when trying them both in the flesh, I immediately found myself favouring the lower-cost Mechanical version. While the reduced size won't suit everyone, the Mechanical provided a more unique, and in my opinion more attractive look, with a darker dial for increased contrast. And it also had a hint of dressiness by way of the super clean chapter ring and overall reduction in visual clutter. And it also exhibited a major advantage over its automatic counterpart, the slim profile. Indeed, the MK1 Automatic was too chunky for my liking, especially with the domed acrylic crystal factored in, whereas the Mechanical provided a much sleeker on-wrist experience, with a case height of just 7.6mm. The stock nylon band was more than serviceable, and overall the MK1 Mechanical just presented itself as a cool, vintage-inspired option with a touch more elegance and distinctiveness than the sea of samey-looking designation-style designs that typically flood these lower price brackets. At a full retail price of $279 on the Timex US site, it's still a bit pricey for me, so I'd recommend either shopping grey market on the likes of Amazon or waiting for a decent discount code on the Timex site to bring it down to a more appropriate level. At 16, the Citizen Odin. Now this may be the most underrated watch I covered in 2025. The Odin released in some regions in late 2024, but due to limited availability and non-existent marketing from Citizen, few learned of it until 2025. I only stumbled upon it when investigating Citizen's back catalogue, and I'm delighted I did, as this is a really fun hidden gem. Now I'll get the downsides out of the way first. The bracelet is only constructed of folded links, and the glass is only basic mineral, both of which are laughable for a watch costing this much. But thankfully that's where the bad news ends. For starters, this watch looks absolutely baller. Not only does it have a nicely sculpted case and a sporty octagonal bezel, but it's also got a sensational dial that helps this piece look far more expensive. The markers look great with a commanding 3D profile that suits the above average case size. Indeed, at just shy of 41mm, it's nicely suited to slightly larger arms, though it's probably not as huge as my tiny wrist makes it look. From a distance, this gives off some real AP Royal Oak vibes, with the waffle-like dial and engraved steel bezel, albeit when you get closer, its real secrets come to the fore. As you can see, this is an eco-drive or solar-powered watch, and the surface is actually one large panel, with a square pattern applied to the surface. While not as tactile as a true waffle dial, the presence of the solar panel actually gives this watch a rather unique sheen that looks pretty swanky, even from a moderate distance, helping make this a functional and flashy choice that you may be able to grab for under $200 from grey market sites, though availability remains hit or miss. At 15, the Timex Continental well, range. Yeah, I cheated a bit here and lumped both of these Continental watches into one slot. The two I tried were the Continental GMT and the Continental Q80 Digital, which I each purchased because of the striking resemblance to two much pricier watches, the Tissot PRX Quartz and PRX Digital. And you know what? I'd take both of these over the equivalent Tissot's. Despite being half the cost, these actually match or beat the Tissot models in several areas, all while not being lazy clones like many of the Chinese homage watches. The Continental Q80 is Timex's best digital watch to date, with intuitive functions, a good backlight, and a clean design packed inside a very well finished stainless steel case. The GMT, meanwhile, offers up a circular textured dial that's more intricate than the vacant ones you're stuck with on most of the Quartz PRX models. Here you also get a quirky central GMT window for another degree of functionality. Whether you'd use it or not is another question, but Quartz GMT watches are surprisingly hard to come by, especially at this price, so the more options the merrier as far as I'm concerned. Yet these watches are both quite affordable, each sitting at well below £200 at the time of recording, with the digital potentially being attainable for around £100 during sale periods. At 39mm across the board, these are all a pretty flexible size, and the bracelets and straps are decent quality too. However, the lack of a micro-adjustable clasp is a big miss, and these each only have mineral glass, which does give them better visibility than many equivalent cost sapphire watches, but leaves them short in terms of scratch resistance. Now I have to throw a little spanner in the works. You see, this video was like 90% complete when I received another Quartz GMT, the VAER G2 Pacific Steel. While not as cheap as the Timex, it's an even more handsome and better built diver-inspired option that would have just edged it out on this list. So yeah, let's call this number 14.5, eh? The reason for such a last gasp entry is actually this watch's sheer popularity. You see, I first wanted to try this way back in April, but it kept selling out over and over again. Luckily, the fifth time around I was able to swing one, and it quickly became obvious why this thing is so hard to come by. In essence, the G2 is like a lower spec but significantly cheaper version of one of their other watches, the G5 Pacific Steel, which is the one I actually ended up covering back in April. Indeed, from a distance, you could confuse them, as they really are very similar, with designs both inspired by vintage Rolexes of the 1950s and 70s. They each have comparable layouts, shapes, and color schemes to one another. Only the G5 is around $900 or about £680, while the G2 is less than half of that. Now, to be clear, the G5 is certainly a better watch, but as we saw on a larger scale with the likes of the Moonswatch, resemblance counts for a lot. Heck, people were paying eBay scalper prices for cheaply made plastic watches, all because they looked like an Omega Moonwatch and carried the official Omega logo for what was still a lot less money than the real thing. And it's a similar effect here with the G2, only the sacrifices aren't nearly as major. You still get the really nice curvaceous steel case, you still get a pretty clear sapphire crystal, you still get a strong 1580M water resistance rating with a screw-down crown and case back, and you still get luminescence that exceeds most big brand alternatives, all while providing 80% of the snazzy looks. It's like the 80-20 rule applied to watchmaking. So yeah, the G2 is a great value GMT, but it does have two caveats. The dial surface is pretty plain compared to the G5 and most others on this list, and while the G5 and G2 are both listed as 39mm online, they actually vary in size. The G5 is much closer to 40mm for some reason, while the G2 is bang on 39, and also a little slimmer. A difference I immediately picked up on when trying the G2 on for the first time. It wears a chunk smaller for sure, which may be good or bad for you, depending on your wrist size. So like the Moonswatch, this G2 is no Omega, but on this occasion, you don't have to worry about it rubbing off on your wrist, as it is still a really solid piece of kit. At 14, the Orient Bambino 75th Anniversary Edition. Whether you can obtain this watch by the time you're watching this video remains to be seen, but the 75th Anniversary Edition of the Orient Bambino altered the biggest area of contention with many watch fans, the main logo. While I don't mind it, the traditional Orient crest has never been to everyone's taste, and some fans have been begging them for years to consider changing it. And in a way, Orient listened, as many of their special anniversary watches shipped with Orient's original handwritten logo instead, whose lighter weight cursive typeface helped extend the vintage illusion even further. While several models sported this change, the Bambino iteration remained the best value pick, with its classic clean visuals and reasonable RRP that have always made it the go-to entry-level dress watch for budget buyers. Orient makes all their own mechanical movements, including the one powering this Bambino, which is pretty cool, and Orient manages to squeeze this into a pretty thin profile as well. well, with the heavily domed crystal accounting for a good portion of the final thickness. Build quality is solid, and while the Bambino won't be winning any spec contests, it's got a great deal more elegance and originality than the vast majority of dress watches at its price. You can usually grab this for around £250 here in the UK, which is slightly more than the standard models. However, this anniversary version also ships with 2 straps, including this smooth suede option that far exceeds the stiff croc-style band that's usually the default. At 40.5mm, it's best suited to average-sized wrists, though those with smaller arms like mine will still want to consider the 38mm models instead, which all feature the old crest at the time of recording. At 13, the Cadison C8200. Now 13 really must be my unlucky number, as my unit arrived with a dial that was quite obviously kinked clockwise. Yeah, when you're paying way under £100 for a Chinese watch with top-tier specs, you have to accept some level of risk when it comes to quality control. So such a mistake was hardly surprising. But what did surprise me was how solid every other part was, which is the reason it's still on this list. While the packaging arrived absolutely battered, the out-of-the-box feel was way better than I'd imagined, with a substantial heft that belied its low price tag. The finishing on the steel case was equally neat, with a nicely integrated solid link bracelet that rounded out the look. The suspiciously strong spec sheet also turned out to be accurate, meaning this Cadison came not only with a Seiko NH35A automatic in the bag, but also a decent sapphire crystal and a ridged teak deck dial pattern that looked mighty impressive even under a macro lens. Apparently this model was created in collaboration with some unspecified German designer, who clearly borrowed a few ideas from our pal Gerald Genter, with the C8200's octagonal steel bezel and Nautilus-like dial pattern being some obvious tells, though it's more of a mashup than it is a rip-off of any specific model. If it weren't for my unit being misaligned, this piece would have placed even higher on this list, as it trumps many budget watches on all fronts. Its only design-related shortcomings are the sheer bulbosity of the case and the limitations of the bracelet, whose links are large and whose butterfly mechanism naturally forgoes micro-adjustment holes, so getting a fit may well be tricky, albeit you can switch it for any 20mm alternative. At number 12, the Seiko Gene Kranz reissue. Now it's no secret that in recent years, I've had one big problem with Seiko watches, and I don't think I'm alone with this, that being price. It's not that their watches are bad or anything, it's just that most are priced hundreds of pounds more than they probably should be, even with dealer discounts taken into account. That's doubly so for their special edition watches, which seem to automatically receive a 4-figure price tag regardless of looks, materials, or historical significance. Well, luckily, there are a couple of outliers that arrived in 2025. The first being the Seiko 5 SRPL 90, aka the Gene Kranz reissue. Now, Gene Kranz is NASA's former chief flight director, who led many of the most famous space missions of all time, including the first moon landings, all while wearing a Seiko 5 sports watch, which this reissue very accurately recreates with modern materials. Yeah, this revamp has a stainless steel case, a Seiko automatic movement, and good water resistance, all while looking near identical to the 60s version. With a 38.2mm case size, it's also compact like the original and wears really nicely on average and smaller wrists, though its squat case shape means it can also be pulled off if you've got a larger arm too. The best bit, of course, is that Seiko didn't add an extra zero onto the price. Launching at a hair under £400, it cost virtually the same as many standard Seiko 5 models did when they launched, making this a straight-up better buy given its historical connections and its other hidden advantages. Yeah, while most Seiko 5 models are stuck with folded link bracelets and hollow end links, the Gene Kranz reissue comes on a solid link bracelet with smaller links for finer adjustability. And this comes with a weight increase that provides a more balanced on-wrist feel than most alternative Seiko 5s. It may sound silly, but this model also comes with a friction-fit clickless bezel that rotates in both directions, therefore avoiding the notorious bezel misalignment issues that even the higher-end Seiko watches seem extremely prone to. Stylistically, it's not reinventing the wheel by any stretch, but it does look remarkably similar to many of the more expensive Seiko models. This one's a fairly limited edition piece, so move quickly if you're interested. At number 11, the Seiko SSB 479. Yes, in a shock to myself and probably everyone else, we have 2 Seiko watches on this list, coincidentally landing back to back. And this one is here for pretty much the same reasons as the last one. It's fairly affordable and aesthetically rivals a bunch of much pricier alternatives. In some cases, I'd say outright beating them as far as visuals are concerned. Indeed, my brother-in-law owns the Seiko Prospect Speed Timer, and I think this much cheaper and slimmer chronograph is objectively the more handsome choice. Sorry, Andy. The SSB 479 looks like it should be a part of Seiko's Presage 60s collection. with a Rolex Daytona-like mid-century design and a K-shape and bezel that look almost like they've rolled directly off the Presage production line. And while the Presage watches are pretty good, the big plus of this piece is the price. For whatever reason, the SSB 479 was available from day one on grey market sites for closer to half of the £400 RRP pushed by Seiko's authorized dealers, which these days, especially in the UK, is quite the outlier. This piece looks much more expensive than that, with a super glossy black dial, thin hands, and sleek markers that make it very easy to dress up or down. This thing could definitely double as your dress watch. What's more, it's not stuck with any price indicative Seiko 5 branding. So while the chronograph wording is a little obtuse, to an untrained eye, the minimal text and absence of icons make this appear much like the higher end Seiko models, which often forgo the range nomenclature completely. The faux patina lume won't be to everyone's taste, and up close those inset subdials are pretty basic, but I do enjoy whacking this thing on my wrist for some of that classic chronograph experience. It's got a heavily domed crystal which also looks the part, even if it's perhaps a tad too aggressively curved, and the bracelet is also better than those on most similarly priced Seiko 5 watches, with solid links throughout and 2 micro adjustment holes that just about work considering the tiny link size. As you might imagine at this price, it's a mecha quartz chronograph, the pushes feel really good, and I wouldn't expect anything less considering that Seiko manufactures the movements in-house too. Size-wise, it's also fairly classic at just shy of 39mm with a 45mm lug-to-lug and also a commendable slimness if you discount the huge crystal. At the full £400 RRP, it's still decent, but I'd probably go grey market if you can, given the rather substantial discrepancy, at which point it's a stunner. Starting out the top 10, we have the Merkur Lightning. Chinese brand Merkur ranked pretty highly on my AliExpress watch brands list, serving up some of the best value releases over the past 18 months. While this model is far from my favourite Merkur, I much prefer their sector dial watch from last year, the aptly named Lightning still places well on this list purely because of its absurd technical prowess. I can't lie, the looks are divisive for sure. It's got a strangely short handset, a starkly raised crystal, and a bizarre band that doesn't fit the look whatsoever. However, it's also packing a dial that single-handedly carries the show. I called the last watch a Presage Pretender, and this one is equally so, with a 3D ridged extreme sunburst dial whose finish is undeniably similar to some of Seiko's popular cocktail time watches, at least in isolation. But this radial effect is surprisingly well executed and even holds up respectably under macro examination, which is all the more remarkable considering you could grab this for around £70 on AliExpress, or around $95 US, at least when it was in stock. That's around a quarter of the cheapest Seiko Presage models, if not less. And at that price, this level of detailing is about as common as an MP lowering your taxes. The fun doesn't end there though, as the steel case is also nice and slim, and it even conceals an in-house manufactured Chinese standard movement under the hood. Yeah, you get a hand-wound mechanical movement here with some decoration at a price where most watches just feature the same old £3 quartz modules. The nylon band is completely ill-suited though, so factor in a replacement if you do enjoy the peculiar design language. At number 9, the San Martin SN0144 GMT. This San Martin is an updated version of last year's best-selling SN0144, which placed in my top 5 thanks to its Jianzhan pottery-inspired enamel dial and insane level of build quality, including one of the best bracelets I've ever come across. This new iteration brings some modifications that arguably improve the overall package, albeit at a notable price increase. Despite what my overly bright footage may indicate, the boxed sapphire crystal here is far clearer than the flat sapphire used on the standard model, and the addition of the internal 24-hour ring also pushes the markers inward slightly, changing the proportions for better or worse. It retains the same vein-like surface and also ships in a range of bright colours such as this purple, all of which come with matching date wheels and corresponding two-tone rings. Of course, you also get the added GMT functionality for tracking a second time zone, if that's something you care about. This one uses the Miyota 9075, which is a pretty good, slim automatic movement that helps this stay almost as thin as its forebearer, at just 12.5mm with the crystal and 10.1 without it. At 39mm wide, it's also right in that Goldilocks zone, making it work for a wide variety of wrists, though I did run into one fit-related frustration. My unit had a tolerance issue on one of the end links, which heavily reduced its pliability. It wasn't an issue on my skinny arm, but for those with bigger wrists, it could have proved problematic. Outside of that, the bracelet is excellent, with a great micro-adjustable slide clasp, and it's just as well finished as the rest of the watch, whose polishing is honestly up there with the likes of Rolex. Believe me, I've actually compared them. The reason this watch isn't higher is that the price price is getting up there, approaching £400 at the time of recording, and the lower cost standard version still provides a very similar experience for less money. At 8, the Proxima PX1720. This, the final GMT on this list, simply does not make mathematical sense. I'm just going to list the specs and let you guess the cost. It's got full stainless steel construction, a solid steel bracelet with on-the-fly micro adjustments, a bidirectional sapphire GMT bezel that even lights up in the dark, an automatic Seiko GMT movement, a Rolex-like screwed caseback, a screw-down crown, a 200-meter water resistance rating, a boxed sapphire crystal, a glitter effect aventurine mineral dial, and even an original design that isn't a lazy copy of something else. Any guesses? No, it's not $1,000. Not even close to 500. No, for most of this year, this flagship diver GMT was purchasable for under £200 on AliExpress. No wonder it's unavailable at the time of recording. Yet this Proxima obliterated just about every mainstream offering, and it even nailed many of the finer details too. The hands, for example, were super clean, faceted, and even had a silver plate covering the central post, a feature typically reserved for luxury watches. Combined with the aforementioned bezel, the markers being made from solid blocks of luminescent material also contributed to its spectacular low light performance, eclipsing the vast majority of watches I've tested. The case finishing here was also well above average, though not quite on the level of St. Martin, while the size was a familiar 39mm, which seems to have been the industry's go-to width in 2025, doesn't it? One of my favorite elements with this brand is, well, the branding. Yeah, Proxima rolls off the tongue pretty nicely, which can't be said for most Chinese AliExpress brands. I can't rank it higher though, as while it's reasonably attractive and clearly a great watch, I personally prefer the looks of many others on this list. Oh, and the monochromatic bezel isn't an ideal match for the navy dial tone either. They do have a white dial version still available though, which sidesteps this flaw, and either are great picks, particularly if you can grab them for under £300. Under £200 and you're golden. At number 7, the Spinnaker Phantom Steel and Phantom White. Typically with lists like this, I steer clear of super limited edition watches. Reason being that by the time the video airs, it's already too late to get one. However, on this occasion, I had to make an exception for the wonderfully creative Spinnaker Phantom series, which took Halloween watches to a whole new level this year. Now, Spinnaker has already released a couple of Ghost Adorned watches in years past, also in partnership with designer Second, those being the 50 Phantoms models, which are a popular rework of their Flus diver and a fun play on the Blancpain 50 Fathoms name and styling. 2025's Phantom Steel and Phantom White were even more original, maintaining the quirky luminescent ghouls, but forgoing the stereotypical Halloween colors in favor of a truly ghost-tastic white and silver look, boosted by the included white elasticated band, which also glowed in the dark, a feature I somehow missed in my first impressions video. As you probably noticed though, that's not the standout feature of this spectacular Spinnaker. Indeed, the plaudits have to go to that one-of-a-kind 3D bezel. Its peculiar, undulating surface perfectly emulates the waves of a Phantom's fabric, and in turn captures the light in ways that no other bezel could hope to achieve. This alone makes this Spinnaker seem more luxurious and exclusive than its moderate sub-£500 price tag would imply. There really is nothing else out there like this at any price point. That's not to say it's not well built in its own right. The Phantom Steel is probably the best made Spinnaker watch to date, with great case finishing and a well-rounded spec list including sapphire crystal and a Miyota 9000 series movement, as well as extra touches such as those you can view through the exhibition rear. Spinnaker really went all out with this watch, as I'd hoped from a limited edition piece, and you'll apparently have a final chance to grab this in early 2026 when they're releasing a second batch of these. The difference, by the way, between the Phantom Steel and Phantom White isn't so much the color, but rather the size and movement. The Phantom Steel here is a 40mm watch with the Miyota Automatic, while the slightly cheaper Phantom White is 43mm with a different K-shape and powered by the inferior but still serviceable Seiko NH35. While it is solidly built, its unique visuals do bring some limitations. Daylight legibility is poor due to the low contrast colors, even though the low light performance is amazing. In a similar vein, the date wheel and Cyclops are both too small to be practical and probably should have been dropped completely for a cleaner look. Either way, this watch is such a standout that I've clung onto it, despite it being arguably too large for my tiny arm. I think that has to qualify it as one of the best watches of the year. At number 6, the Kiaso K001. I discovered this little-known budget gem when painstakingly searching for any viable Casio Duro alternatives, and boy was this a turn-up for the books. Indeed, this sub-£60 AliExpress banger ended up not only matching, but actually exceeding Casio's famous dive watch in almost every area. outside of brand recognition anyway. Yeah, I can't attest to Keeso's customer service or quality control. What I can attest to is the fact that this watch is considerably cheaper than the Casio in many territories, including the UK, and it's still really well made. I tested its water performance up to my machine's maximum 6-bar rating, which it passed with ease, as you'd hope considering the screw-down crown and case back. Not only did it arrive in surprisingly stylish iPhone-like packaging, but the in-hand feel straight out of the box was far better than expected, with a relatively weighty feel for a quartz watch and a well-cut, neatly finished steel case that was leagues ahead of most big brand options at this price, where you're lucky to even get steel most of the time. The bezel, meanwhile, is objectively better than the Duros, with a remarkable ceramic insert and a tighter, more satisfying action that also sounds great. The bracelet is also superior to anything offered by Casio or 99% of other sub-£100 brands, with solid steel links and a 3-step micro-adjustable clasp. Though mine arrived with one head-scratching inclusion, the complimentary link removal tool. After several failed attempts, I eventually realized that the included tool is completely incompatible with the watch it ships with. Indeed, this bracelet surprisingly uses screw links, which are generally better and easier than the usual push pins, but good luck extracting them with this plastic push pin tool. So yeah, hopefully they can change that in the future. Luckily, this Keeso is so cheap you can probably afford a full screwdriver set on the side anyway. Aside from that, the bracelet is top notch, and because this Keeso is only 42mm with a short 47mm lug to lug, the overall wearability is better than the unwieldy Casio for most arms. What's more, this Keeso even has a sapphire crystal as well as lume down markers that not only look incredibly neat up close, but also provide this watch with nighttime brightness that the Casio could only dream of. Under the hood is, oddly, a Swiss Ronda quartz movement. Perhaps not the optimal choice, as the awkwardly positioned date window may reveal, but hey, it's still better than I expected, with dial match colouring to help it blend in. The K001 is also one of very few spec monster AliExpress divers that isn't just a blatant copy and paste of a Submariner or some other famous design. Now, the case and bezel have probably been plucked from the Momentum C quartz, as you can see here, but the rest of the dial and detailing are considerably different, giving this Keeso a more individual look that doesn't feel quite as lazy or generic as other rival divers. My main gripe here is the really hazy crystal. The AR coating here is about as effective as an inflatable submarine and could have been left out entirely. Either way, this Keeso was a very welcome surprise. I'm keen to see more from them moving forward. Starting out in the top 5, we have the Addiesdive AD2037. Oh, and also the AD2095. Yeah, I've grouped these together because in many ways, they're essentially the same watch. They share an identical spec sheet, including the same case, movement, crystal, and dial layout, differing only in the dial detailing and handset. The AD2037 is the vintage-looking model, heavily inspired by the Patek Tasti Tondi from the 1940s, with a tachymeter scale and period-appropriate accents like the leaf handset and the prominent Roman numerals. The AD2095 instead rocks an automotive 1960s look, with high-contrast subdials reminiscent of the Hamilton Intramatic. While both of these are similar to these big brand watches, like with the Keeso, neither are direct clones, with each boasting a string of unique elements from their case size, case shape, and colors to finer details such as the hands, crystals, and indices. Basically, these Addiesdives do just enough to stand on their own 2 feet. As far as quality goes, they've got no trouble accomplishing that, with a fit and finish that seems frankly impossible for such a low amount of money. The steel cases are sleek and elegant with particularly clean polishing, the subdials have the concentric circle texture usually reserved for higher cost watches, and all the markers on these are applied rather than printed, in shockingly precise fashion, may I add. These watches don't even use the basic quartz movements you'd expect them to. No, these are rocking Mecha Quartz Seikos, meaning they even have a tactile clunk to the pushers and that characteristic semi-smooth sweep to the chronograph hand, which again is totally foreign for most watches costing under 100. Both of these even have strong aquatic performance at 100 meters, and the stock bands are at least usable across the board, even if some are pretty big considering the compact case size. Yeah, this pair are 38mm wide, which is towards the smaller end of the chronograph spectrum. Another positive is that neither uses the hideous diver-style Addiesdive icon on the dial. Luckily, that monstrosity is reserved for the case rear, where only your skin will be seeing it. Overall, these are just super stylish, absurdly spec'd chronographs at a price where they have little to no competition. At number 4, the Casio Edefis EFK 100. This was a landmark release for Casio when it hit the market back in August, marking the first mechanical watch from this brand since it entered the industry in 1974. Given Casio's manufacturing prowess, some were a little disappointed to discover that the movement powering this watch wasn't actually made by them. It turned out to be a run-of-the-mill Seiko NH35A, similar to that already found in hundreds of other watches. Considering the magnitude of this release, it seems an odd choice to rely on a direct competitor, and it didn't feel quite so pure. But what it did mean was that Casio was able to keep the cost of this thing really low. After seeing the leaks of this, I thought there was no chance it would be below like £400 or $500 US. Thankfully, I was wrong with this one. This new automatic was purchasable from just £269 or $280, and wasn't even limited edition, making it more accessible than anyone expected. Now, the EFK does have two major shortcomings, which I'll get to, but it also has several industry-leading traits that work in its favor. The finishing, for one, is exceptional, with a level of brushing in particular that will remain competitive at the £1,000 mark. Similar can be said of the precision cut hour markers, which seem to almost sparkle as you rotate the watch, dangling perilously over the surface beneath. Of course, you have the electroforming dial, as they're calling it, which in this case is supposed to simulate the texture of forged carbon. Now, with this watch, the dials do vary a bit. The coloured variants are faux carbon, while the black ones offer the real thing at a slight price bump. While I do think this blue one is impressive, I wouldn't say it quite lives up to the obviously edited stock images that were so heavily pushed in the marketing. Part of that is down to the low quality crystal. It's sapphire, so it is nice and scratch resistant, but it seems to have no anti-reflective coating and terrible clarity that heavily reduces its contrast and saturation when outdoors or near any other large light source. Nevertheless, in the correct lighting conditions, this Casio straight up looks like a high-end luxury watch, with a level of construction that convincingly sells the illusion. The integrated bracelet, for example, maintains the exemplary finishing of the main body and flows perfectly down from the lugs, though the clasp has a stingy 2 micro adjustment holes, which can result in some fit issues. On that note, the EFK wears quite large for a 38.9mm watch, mainly due to those fixed end links and the relatively straight and thick 12.6mm profile, both of which put it just beyond the reach of my smaller 6¼ wrist, though I think it should be viable for anyone with a 6.5" wrist or over. For a first automatic release, I think it's a beautiful and versatile design that manages to fit many outfits without looking vanilla, a task that's far from easy to achieve. With some fine-tuning, this one could have topped the list. However, for me, the crystal situation is tricky to look past, both figuratively and literally. At 3, the San Martin SN0144. I knew this watch would be special from the listing pictures alone, where the dark mother-of-pearl dial boasted the 1-2 punch of a colourful iridescent sheen and a highly textured spiral that combined to create an intoxicating marine-like effect that I just had to see for myself. Here's a closer look at it through my macro lens. I mean, how impressive is this? San Martin must have Merlin tied up in the back room, as witchcraft is the only way this sort of detailing is possible for under 350 quid. Mother of pearl has always been a divisive material for me when it comes to watches. In a lot of cases, it looks too effeminate for my taste, and I don't think I'm alone with that opinion. This darker piece though, with all the added texture, is comfortably the best implementation I've seen so far. It definitely gives off some fish-like vibes, though they've got another model that takes that even further, the SN0151, which straight up looks like an array of scales in the images, but I haven't tried that one so far. In typical San Martin fashion, the rest of this watch is exceptionally well built. Many San Martin watches reuse the same cases to save costs, but this SN0144 uses an updated design with more shapely curves and a thinner profile than most previous pieces, which I tend to prefer. It sits very flush to the wrist, it's a hair over a centimeter tall, but looks considerably slimmer thanks to the sculpted mid-case. San Martin is widely considered the benchmark for finishing at this price, and this one again hits those lofty heights with exquisite polishing that extends to the 20mm solid steel bracelet as well. But this bracelet is also where my big nitpick lies with the SN0144. Quality-wise, it's near perfect with solid links and a great clasp, but the length is cutting things very fine for small arms. This is a roughly 39mm watch, but even with all the links removed and the clasp shortened to the max, it's clearly too big for my 6¼ wrist. Now my arm is very petite and probably too small for this watch, so most real buyers likely won't run into this issue, but I figured it was worth mentioning as it may be troublesome if your wrist is anywhere under 6¾ which was never the case with previous San Martin bracelets. This watch is powered by the fantastic Miyota 9015, which enables its sleekness, and it's kept sealed by a super smooth screw-down crown and threaded caseback, contributing to its 100-meter water resistance rating. The luminescence here is also superb, beating almost everything else out there. Now I will say that this piece ranks so highly more for its technical achievements than its outright attractiveness. Even if this watch did fit me, I'm not sure I'd wear it over other options on this list. It's a bit murky for me, and there's still something about the San Martin branding that acts as a bottleneck to my enjoyment. Luckily, some of that has been solved with the next watch on this list. And number 2, the Jianghun JH0301. When San Martin unveiled this Arista spin-off brand a couple of years back, I was skeptical to say the least. I mean, they were already gaining a bunch of steam, why risk flying off the tracks? And their first few releases seem to confirm my doubts, with some interesting style decisions to say the least. To get you up to speed, Jianghun was created as a vessel for San Martin's more original and Chinese-inspired designs. And those early models were certainly that, even if the final results were pretty stomach-turning to the average Western consumer. Luckily, they've since retreated to a less extreme, more comfortable middle ground, and the results have been spectacular. I've been frankly blown away by the aesthetics and build quality of the new JH0301, whose CNC machine gear shade dial, and in this case mint green color, immediately reminded me of the much pricier Christopher Ward 12 that I reviewed last year. Not only in style, but in quality too. Yet the execution here is genuinely competitive with many of the Swiss big boys. With a final look so luxurious, it may even attract the wrong sort of attention in a city like London. Luckily, and quite miraculously, this Jianghun will typically set you back under £400, perhaps closer to $300 during sale periods, so you won't have to be Gollum-like precious with it when you're out and about. This Jianghun carries over many of the strengths of San Martin watches, including the phenomenal case finishing and the superb spec sheet. Again, this uses a Miyota 9000 series automatic with strong water performance and a sapphire crystal. You can also see the shared DNA between this and the likes of the SN0144, with each having those radial textured dials and the same handset, albeit the Jianghun brings some minor upgrades to the table for roughly the same cost. The sapphire crystal on this model is considerably clearer than that on the San Martin, the Miyota 90S5 movement is marginally better with improved shock resistance, and the bracelet is also less problematic. Jianghun lets you choose between a 3-link and 5-link option. The 3-link is the same as that fitted to most San Martin watches, so it's got great finishing and doesn't have the compatibility issue of the SN0150's bracelet, but my pick is still the 5-link bracelet. This is the prettiest 5-link bracelet I've ever come across. Even the inner links have polished chamfers running down each side, and it also has female end links, so it wears smaller than the other one with extra flexibility. Both bracelets feature this glide lock style mechanism, by the way, that's super easy to use, zero trouble finding a comfortable fit here. The hour markers on this one are generally taller and more faceted than those on the San Martin, which I think just looks better, and more generally, I prefer the look and sound of the Jianghun branding these days. Early on, I wouldn't have said that, but the more I've sat on it, the more I've come to appreciate the fact they aren't trying to pass these off as anything but Chinese, in a market where questionable faux European branding is a dime a dozen. It's trickier to pronounce, but it feels more genuine. The Jianghun symbol arguably looks better than the cramped characters of the San Martin hexagon as well, with the only minor nitpick being that the text on this model can appear messier than it is, due to the shadows it casts onto the textured surface beneath. So how can they offer these improvements over a watch that was already industry leading? Well, I'm assuming it's mostly because they're not using marketplace sites like AliExpress. Indeed, these Jianghuns are only purchasable directly from their own website, making this a true direct-to-consumer product, literally straight from the factory to your front door. And it seems that, unlike most cutting out the middleman companies that just pocket the difference, Jianghun is passing most of these savings on to you. I mean, they must be, given the looks of this. And while you don't get AliExpress's usual buyer protections here, you can at least check out with PayPal for a basic level of coverage. This watch is so well-rounded, it's difficult to find any areas to criticize. At a push, I guess the case is a bit close to a Rolex Oyster Perpetual for my preference, and I've already seen it on many other San Martin watches before, but considering the rest of what you get here, it's pretty inconsequential. It's another 39mm watch, by the way, with a 46mm lug-to-lug, so it's right in the sweet spot for most people. Sadly for me, it's a touch big for my little wrist, but I'll be jumping all over a 36mm version if it ever hits the market. While I think this mint green is gloriously pretty, it also comes in 4 other sexy tones, including a very tempting copper that I almost got instead. And you know what? This watch actually deserves the phrase affordable luxury. That might be a first. So what possibly could have beaten it? And number 1, the Timex E-Line 1983 automatic. Yeah, this one was never in doubt. And I've kind of trolled you a bit here because it's been on my wrist the entire time. I knew the Timex E-Line was sticking around from the moment I peeled off the plastic. There's just something about this 80s design that immediately hit all the right notes for me, with its super clean dial and nicely sculpted square case that made this my go-to grab watch in 2025. Shirt, hoodie, polo, whatever it be, this watch suits my wardrobe to a T. Make sure you credit me when you use that Timex. But yeah, wrist time is probably the number 1 factor when it comes to watch collecting, and for that reason alone, this was a shoe-in for the top spot. After all, what good is a mega spec watch if you never find yourself wearing it? On that note, this Timex isn't so great on the tech front. I mean, for a standard retail price of around £200 or $249, it's okay with a nicely finished steel case and Miyota 8215 under the hood, but the acrylic crystal and 5-bar water resistance are hardly going to light up the spec sheet. What I will say is that acrylic is probably the only viable option for this watch, as the crystal's niche shape and extreme protrusion would have made other materials either too expensive or too vulnerable to shattering to be worth using. It's also period appropriate, I guess, even if it sucks on paper. But it's quirks like this crystal that give the E-Line its character, and that's what I love about this one. It's a reissue of a TV dial Timex from the 80s, but the minor design tweaks and modernizations have left this reissue looking much more handsome, positioned like a halfway house between those vintage pieces and a modern sports watch, with a vibe not too dissimilar from many of the latest trendy integrated bracelet watches. And arguably, this Timex looks cooler than some of those for a fraction of the price. The dial here may not have the intricate surface of others on this list, but it feels proportionally perfect, with a narrow width that gives the design enough breathing room on either side. The markers and hands are pretty basic, and lume is totally absent, but the minimalistic, gentle-like visuals are well worth the sacrifice. There's just something impalpable about the way this watch is put together that makes it feel straight out of a luxury design magazine. Now, most real high-end watches don't have a bracelet like this. On paper, the expansion bracelet sounds like a disaster waiting to happen, especially given how pinchy most of these can be. Thankfully, Timex has cooked up what is by far the best expansion band I've tried, and from the looks of the customer reviews, I'm far from alone in that opinion. That's mainly due to this ingenious tool-free link removal system, which lets you tweak the fit perfectly to ensure the level of tightness is bob on, a crucial factor when rippage is a risk. The strip of adjustable links also doesn't expand at all, meaning you get a whole section where plucking is much less likely. In fact, I could probably count the number of plucks I've experienced in the last 6 months on one hand. The advantage is you can lob this watch on and off near instantly, it's great for fidgeting with, and it's generally super comfortable, as the fit adapts to you throughout the day. But if you're looking for a watch to wear for intense exercise, you may want to switch it out, as vigorous movement can leave things a bit perilous. Don't let the tiny headline size put you off with this one. On wrist, the 34mm diameter wears just like a 38mm circular watch, which is typical of these square watches. It fits my small wrist quite nicely and could probably accommodate up to around a 7-inch wrist with no issues. During sale periods or on the grey market, you can often grab the E-Line for well under the RRP, at which point it becomes a no-brainer must buy. You'll find it affiliate linked in the video description alongside all the other watches. It ships in a few other colours too, including one on a standard strap, but this navy blue is definitely my pick. And for more of my picks, you can check out last year's top 20 list on screen right now. If I'm honest, some of those are even better.